Okay, today we're just going to go over some of the basics for building React components, containers pretty quickly. And it's not really that difficult to build something in React once you understand the basics. And this may be a longer session, I don't know. I'm not that well versed with React yet, but I can tell you that I've been able to build a lot of stuff pretty quickly here. So let's see how this goes. And I'll just upload it um, and so that you guys can kind of look at everything and make sure that you guys can follow some of the cool stuff we're doing here. So we use the React boilerplate, obviously, and that literally helps us speed up development. And there's a lot of generators there that generate the styles, the components, the layout, the connections to Redux and the Sagas and everything. So you don't have to worry about doing all of that manually. Even if you're not doing React boilerplate, it's always a good idea to spend some time up front, depending on the size of your project, obviously, but spend some time up front and um, write down these generators or create spend some time and create these generators so that you don't have to do them again and again. So what we're going to build is the layout, the rough infrastructure for building this page. This is a page that we've designed for a storefront. So you can see that this particular section is going to be a carousel component. Obviously, I'm only showing one right now, but this would contain all of the featured items or featured events. And then you have regular events that are on sale or things that you can buy, and these are right here. And each event is a card. Inside each event, you have different subcomponents. Maybe there's a title component, there's an image component, and you don't need to have these components. All I'm saying is these are some elements that you can render inside. So the way I see this, you're going to build a page that contains a featured events list, if you will, and also an events list. Um, there are some advanced things like pagination and stuff that I've not included here. Don't worry about that right now. I think we can just go ahead and lay out the scaffolding. My goal isn't to build a clean and great looking HTML. It's rather actually identifying the steps that I take to quickly scaffold a lot of this information. So let's get into it. So the best thing you can do right now is I'm at the directory where my source code is, and I can do just npm run generate. And this is the React boilerplate generator, and it will ask you, what do you want to build? Do you want to build a component, a container, or do you want to add a language? So let's just say I want to build a container component. This is important because this is the guy that's going to load up all of the featured events and everything, and it's going to be connected to the Redux store. So we have to build it as a container. And let's just say I want to build it as a component, and then I'm just going to say main page. Let's just call it that. We can always rename that later, but I think that's a great name. What do you want? Headers? Yes, this is going to be a standalone page, so it's going to need headers. Do you want actions, constants, reducers, tuple? Yep, I'm going to say yes. Do you want sagas? Absolutely. It's going to communicate with web services, APIs, so yes. And do you want I8 and internationalization? Yep. Just gonna, do you want to load asynchronously? Absolutely. So there, it generates a bunch of things, and you can see them here. There's tests, there's actions, constants, index, loadable, messages, reducer, saga, and selectors. So it's pretty good. It wires up everything for you. So let's go to the actions. So here you can see some default actions that are wired up. So if you really look back at this picture, so you need to load featured events. So that is one action. And then you need to load events. That is another action. So let's kind of start playing around with that. So let's say I don't want this default action anymore. So I'm just going to do load featured events, copy this guy and paste it here. And then I'm going to copy this a couple more times, and I'll tell you why. Success. So if this succeeds, you can do that, or you can do error. So let me close this guy out. Yeah, let me close this guy out. So we don't get distracted. Anyway, so those are the actions for featured events. And then obviously you gotta copy this guy, make sure, and copy this guy, make sure. So for some reason it wants you to have those in a new line. Not sure why. We'll just leave it there for now. Okay, and then let's do actions for regular events. So we'll just copy this. We don't need to get really fancy here. So we'll do load events, and then we'll do load events success, and then we'll have another one for load events error, and then we'll copy this guy there, copy this guy there, copy this guy there. So now you have your namespaced action constants. So the very next thing that I do is I define the action. So let's just go and do imports first. So I don't need the default action anymore. So I'm just going to do load events success, load events error, load featured events error, load featured event success. So I know this guy wants it this way. Let's do it this way. There you go. Pretty good. These are good to go. I'm just going to remove some spacing. It's really anal about some of these things. But anyways, I can remove this guy. Actually, let's just do this as load events. And then one of the things that I need just in here is a tenant ID. And then I may do a skip and a take. And I may also have a search term in here. So, and then I'm going to do load events. And then tenant ID, skip, take, search term. And obviously, as other things come up, we can go ahead and add them there. So there's your function, the action. So this is going to call and return this object anytime you want to raise that action. So I'm just going to copy this guy, and let's quickly build. So load events success. When something succeeds here, all you're going to get here is a bunch of events. So, and then events, you can just do that. And then this guy says load events success, the type. And then let's do another one for load events error. And in this case, I'm just going to say error. And then let's pass that and then do load events error. Okay, so there's three actions that took pretty much less than 5 minutes to do. I'm going to copy them just like that. I'm going to paste them here, and let's call these featured events, featured events success, featured events error. And then this guy will be called featured events, and then error is good. And featured events just needs the tenant ID, skip, and take. You don't need a search term for featured events, so I'm just going to take that off. And obviously, don't forget to change these. And then you would be load featured events success, and then load featured events error. So just have a look at it one more time. What we're doing right now is we're just simply building these actions. You have featured events success, you have featured events error, you have load featured events, and then you have load events error, load events success, and load events. What is this? Oh, there's a comma missing there. There you go. So I'm pretty comfortable with this action, so I'm just going to close this out. I'm pretty comfortable with these things, even though I don't know why it wants it on the next line. There's some setting in there maybe that the prettier wants it, but there you go. I guess let's just make it right once and for all. There you go. So those are our constants. I'm going to close the constants file. We don't need that. Let's go into reducer. The reducer is pretty straightforward. So the initial state defines, what you want here. So in this case, whenever that page loads, the initial state is going to be featured events is going to be an empty array, and then you're going to have events, which is also going to be an empty array. And let's just start with these two for now, and then we'll kind of take care of that. So all it is doing is passing the initial state in the reducer, which is perfect, and then the action. So let's get our actions first. So load events. Actually, I know this guy is going to do that, so let's do that from now. And then load events error, load events success, load featured events error, load featured events success. So I think we've gotten all these taken care of. Now let's go in here, load events. So what happens when you load events? All you need to do is set the state for events and then action.events. I believe that's all you need to do. Now when that is, actually no, my bad. We need to have a loading of false and error or true in here. And so load events is not going to do much. All it's going to do is say loading equal to true set, and then error equal to false, because this is just the signal for load events. Now you do load events success. When you are successful, then you need to do dot set, and then you need to do loading first of all equal to false, dot set, error equal to false. Let's just do this in the next line here. And then you got to do set, and then you got to do events, and then you got to do action.events. Because remember, if you go back to the actions, we're passing the events for the type of load event success. So that's what I'm doing here. This guy can go in here too. Okay, so that's all you need to do there for the load event success. Now, let's just say if there's a case of load events error. Let's say there was an error. So what you got to do is you got to return state.set. Loading obviously goes to false. Set error equal to action.error. That's all. That's all you got to do. And then case load underscore featured events. Again, you literally do that same thing. And potentially you could do loading featured, error, featured. Let's just do that. Let's try to keep it kind of clean and isolated so that that should be false. Alright, so loading featured equal to true, error featured is false, which is good. Case load events error, featured events error, and then I'm just going to do that. And then loading equal to false, and then action.error. Alright, that takes care of that. And then the final one is case load featured events success. Return state.set, loading featured, false.set, error featured false, and then I do set featured events, and then action. I think we call them featured events. Featured events, that's right. Perfect. So this guy wants them on the next line. Let's do that. There we much cleaner. Okay, so what we've done so far, we've created our constants for the things that we know we need for actions. We've created those action methods, and we've created the reducers. And literally all of this has taken us about thereabouts of 10 minutes, I think. And that's great. That's how we want it to be. So now that we've done that, let's go into our index. And what's going to happen here essentially is let's look at the page here. So we have some reselect selectors, which is great. We have prop types, and we have Saga, we have messages and reducer. So, and then we obviously have this selector here. So let's go and think a little bit. So this state, there are two things that we need from our state. Let's think of this. So we need the featured events, and we need these events. So let's go and lock that down first. So okay, so this guy, app state to props, essentially says, hey, I'm going to get things from your state, and I'm going to turn them into props. So let's call the first prop as featured events, which is perfect, and this is going to be something. Let's just leave it there. And then we're also going to say events, and we're going to get this something. And then what we now need to do is say, okay, these are also my prop types, so I'm going to do featured events, and I'm going to do prop types.func, prop types.array, and then I'm going to leave it there, and then events, I'm also going to say prop types.array. All right, so those are the two things that I've built. Now, how do you get these from state? So that's where these selectors come into play. So I'm going to say make featured events selector. Let's just say that for this guy knows how to go in and load up featured events. That's as simple as that. And then I'm going to say for the same thing, make events selector. Okay, so what I've done so far is I've created two selectors that are going to get these things, featured events from state and events from state, and they're going to associate them with these props so that they can be used inside this component. Very, very, very straightforward. There's nothing magical going on here. Where it gets really interesting is when you start getting in the selectors. So now in the selector, obviously, I need to create something that gets that state. So you can notice that the main state, they've already created this guy. So this, if you notice here, all the state is getting stored inside of this key, which is the main page for the state. And if you go to a reducer, you will notice that everything in here, all of these elements are going to be inside of this state. So that's pretty cool how you can do that with React. Every container essentially can have its own state. Now you don't need that. You can put it in the global state if you want by going into actions and all, but you don't need to worry about that. So let's go in there and let's build our specific selectors now. So I want to do the one of this. Let's just do constant make featured events selector. So this guy is a function. He's going to take a create selector, and he's going to literally need select main page domain. This is, remember, this is where you get the main state from for this. So you got to put this as the first function. Once you get that, now you can do substate, and then you can do substate of get, I think, and then you can do from the state. You got to now get from, let's say, featured events. That's all you need. That will return. Okay, it wants it to be on the next line. That, and then wants that. That's pretty sure. What is it saying here? It wants that on the next line too. There you go. Crazy. There you go. Hopefully that takes care of that. Ah, crazy, crazy, crazy. There you go. Some of these things are extremely annoying, but that's just the way it is. All right, buddy. There you go. Okay. There you go. So you have a featured event selector that you already built. And then let's just build one more and call him make event selector. Oh, I see. I have a mistake there. Featured featured event selector, make event selector, and in this case I'm just getting events. Now it wants it on the same line, so extremely annoying. There we go. Okay, let's export these guys out and then use them inside our users. So okay, so now in here let's go and import them from our selectors. There's our selectors. So this was a default one. We don't even need that, honestly. So I'm just going to remove that and I'm just going to say make event selector. So what I've done is I've created the selectors in the selectors here. All it is doing is getting the state from here, the main state, and then it is getting the substate from there and substate from there. I got these, and then I don't need this main page at all. I can just get it. So there you go. Make event selector, make featured event selector. So essentially what I've done, just to recap, we created some constants on the things, the actions that we want to run. Then we created the action methods, essentially just saying that whenever this action is raised, this is what you need to do for the type, and this is the payload. And then we created the reducer, and we said, hey, anytime this action comes through, this is what I want to set in my state. And we set all the state keys correctly. These are the main ones. And then we went in the selector, and all we're doing right now is saying, hey, I just want to get something from state. How do you get that? Well, you just get the main state first, and then from that you extract the substate. So I think that's pretty much all you need. And how all this loads up is obviously done using a Saga in this case. But let's kind of play around with this a little bit. So you've defined in your component the prop types as arrays, which is what they should be. And then you also created the selectors that get the items from state and then put them into props. So where do you use these props? So right here. So I'm going to do constant, and I'm going to do featured events equal to is.props.featured events. I think it wants them as destructuring, so let's just do that. Yeah, some new stuff in there. That's just, and then I'm going to do constant event list. Let's just call it that. No, let's just call it events. Let's be consistent. This dot props dot events. Got to have one more dot there. Oops. There you go. So we have these two guys now. And right now, all I want to do, honestly, is just console.log, and I'm going to do featured events. Let's give it a key there. There we go, and then I'm just going to copy this guy and then say events, and then I want to say events. Okay, that's good enough for now. At least we can look and make sure everything is going good. There's a few things that are here that need to be done, but that's besides the point. So, okay, what's going to happen here is when this page loads, it's going to go and look for featured events and event selector, but there is nothing that is making this page go, I want to load the events. What is triggering the process of loading? So we got to do that. So In here we do component did mount. It's very important, and in here we're going to say load featured events, and then we're going to do load events. Very simple. That's the guy that will be responsible. So every time this page loads, he will go and execute this these two methods. So now you can directly call these methods from here, but we're going to do it in a special way. We're going to do a dispatch to props. So the way this works, let me show you an example that I have here. The way this works is you define a particular method name, and you pass it a parameter that you want, and then it will go ahead and dispatch things. You actually call dispatch, and then you call that action. So in our case, let me just go and show this to you. I think it'll make much more sense once I do it. So first of all, we got to import those actions. So one is load featured events, and then load events from actions. Okay, so these two guys are defined in our actions, and we need these when this page loads. Now in the dispatch, I'm going to create, let's see, I keep on forgetting that syntax. Okay, that's how we're going to do it. Got it. So we're going to, I don't even want to worry about this guy. I'm just going to say load events, right? And this guy is going to take a tenant ID. It's going to take a skip, take, and a search term. Very important to do that. And then this guy obviously calls a dispatch, and then that. So I'm going to do a dispatch, and then I'm going to do load events, but this is the action load events. And then you can see that it takes a tenant ID, skip, take, search term. So we're gonna play with this a little bit. So this is a function that I've defined that takes these 4 parameters, and then it literally calls dispatch, and it says I want to dispatch this action whenever you call this function. That's all it is doing. So I'm gonna leave that there. Then I'm going to define another function. I'm going to tap that there because it doesn't like it. And I'm going to define another function called load featured events. And then I'm going to take a tenant ID in there. I'm going to take skip and take. And then I'm going to do dispatch. Anytime I call this method, what I want to do is I want to dispatch the action that we have called load featured events, and you'll see it has tenant ID, skip, take, and then that's that. So essentially what we're doing is we're saying anytime you want to dispatch, you want to call an action, don't directly call it from this component did mount. Call it using a dispatcher, and that's what this function is doing. So now I'm essentially going to do load events, and then I'm going to do a tenant ID. Let's just do something here, skip 0. Let's just take 15, and let's just put an empty search term. That's all you need, and then I need to do load featured events, and then I'm going to do 1, 0, and then I'm just going to take the top 5 featured events. I don't want to take more than that. It's like single quotes here. My C# world revolves around double quotes, so it's hard. There you go. Okay, so essentially what you've done is you've created a component did mount, and all you're saying is every time the component loads, I'm going to load events and I'm going to load featured events. So when I call this method, it's essentially going to go in here, and then it's going to take those parameters and it's going to dispatch an action. When that action gets dispatched, it's going to go in here, load events, and then it's going to take the tenant ID, skip, take, and it's going to just return this object. And then the reducer is going to get that load events, and then all it is going to do is do all these things, set them to false, And then there's going to be a Saga, obviously, that takes care of it. So if you wanna do some debugging, let's do this here. Console.log, and I'm just going to say in load events reducer, and then we'll do action.tenant ID, action.skip. Oops, we can do more than one, I think. Let's just do action, and then we'll see what that looks like. And then let's also go in here, and in here we'll say in load events action, and then we'll just do tenant ID just to make sure that it loads up. Okay, and then the index. So we have load events, load featured. Let's not worry about featured events right now. So we're passing it 1 to 1 to 1, 1 to 1 to 1, yeah. And then you're doing 15 events per page, and then you're doing load featured events, and you're just getting 5. All of this should just flow very easily. So what you now need to do is wire this guy up so that it can be loaded. So that's inside our main guy here. So I'm just going to create a route right now. I'm just going to call it events. Let's just do that. And then I'm going to say main page. And then let's import the main page. So where is the home page? Yeah, let's just do that. And then do main page. Main page. Okay. Tenant selector setting. I don't think I need those. Anyways, never mind. So that's that. When I do an events, it will literally go and load me the main page. Let's see, do I need anything else? Oh yeah. When I go into the header, actually no, I don't even need that. So what I've done is I've wired up inside the action. I've just wired up a home page, a main page. When I do this, it should trigger it. So let's go and do yarn start and see where we are. So far so good. No issues there. Let's open this up and let's go to events. And you'll see featured, it's showing something. And then in load events. So there was an action that was triggered. Action. It didn't go into the reducer yet, but don't worry about that. There is something here that is breaking. Expected array, invalid events of the type object. Yeah, let's fix that. Values undefined. Alright, so let's fix a few things here. So first of all, dispatch for props. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong one, aren't I? Okay, so let's go to the main page. Let's flag this for now. Let's not worry about these right now. Props are featured events. Props back. So let's go to our reducer first. Let's see what's going on there. These are arrays. Not sure why it's saying that. We'll take it step by step. So we have let me actually also hide this for the time being. Let's really narrow it down. So you have load events 1 to 1 to 1, which was fine. It did the dispatch because it said load events action, which is perfect. So let's refresh this again. Required on main page. Oh, I see what's going on. That we don't need that. So the prop types was marked as required, but we don't need the dispatch in here. So there you go. So that should take care of that error. Now featured events of the type object supplied to main page expected array, and that is correct. This featured events right now, let's do this. Let's do console.log, and then we'll do this.props.featured events. And then let's refresh this guy. So if you look, this is a list object, and it's got some stuff in here. So that's what's going on. So I'm just going to, for the time being, we're gonna change this to an object, and this also for an object. And I'll tell you why. When it comes as a JSON array, we can go and play around with it and change it. So this should work just fine. So now you're in a load events action. You're passing this tenant ID to it. Now you're passing this, and this should go fine too. So if I even do the load featured events, let's go and just copy this guy and do load featured events, and then we'll just say in load featured events action, and then we'll just do tenant ID there too. So there you go. So you can see that both these actions are getting raised every time the page loads, which is perfect. That's exactly what you want. And obviously the reducer isn't being invoked right now, but you know, we'll get there. So let's go to the most important one now, which is the Saga. So the Saga, as you can see, allows you to run API calls. It's a side effect to the reducer, so essentially anything that's a side effect in the reducer, you can move it into a Saga, which is a middleware. Essentially it will catch the items based on the method name. So let me show you a Saga that I created here. So in this case, I wanted these actions. Anytime these actions were executed, I wanted to run some things. So I think, let me explain this as I'm coding it. So I want to create a function called load events, and I want to create a function called load featured events. So let's do that. I'm going to keep the Saga open. I'm going to close everything else out. And then let's go to the main page Saga, and then we'll keep that on, and we'll keep this on, and then we'll just split this. Okay, perfect. So first of all, you need to open this because these are needed by Redux take call quit. I'll show you why. And then I just need to do export function, and this is a yield function, so I got to do that. And I'm going to do load featured events, and obviously there's going to be things in here. And then there's going to be function star load events. I did that. There we go for that. And then all I'm saying is, hey, my default Saga should yield both of these. So I gotta do all, and then I gotta do load featured events. I think at least that's what I need to do. We'll figure it out. It's been a while since I've done that. So yeah, these have to be in an array. There you go. There you go. For the time being, let's just assume that. Okay, so what you need to do in here is to do call the API. This will get featured events, and then to do set in action, set result in action. Same here, we do to do call the API. This will get events, set result in action. And we're just gonna take shortcuts, and I'll show you what I'm doing here. So what happens when you, let's just say somehow you got these values, and that's where my mocking comes into play. So I'm just going to create a new folder here. This is how I usually work. I create a new file and let's just call it events.js, and then I'm going to call a new file featured events.js. Okay, so I'm going to do const events equal to an array, and I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to do an ID equal to 1, and let's just say title equal to hello. That's 1. I'm just going to do 2 and then hello 2. I think it needs a spacing of 2. There we go. And then I'm just going to do export default events. And then move this guy in. There we go. Okay, so that's my featured events. I'm just literally going to copy that, put it here. I'm just going to change this to featured events. I'm going to export that guy, and I'm going to say featured hello, featured hello 2. Okay, it's just so we know that these are good. This guy's, oops, this guy needs to have a spacing of 2. There we go. This guy can go. Okay, so you have events and you have featured events. I've marked these out now. So all I'm going to do literally is get these guys in here. So import events from box / events. Import featured events from box featured events. That's it. So what you're doing is you're just essentially not worrying about the API right now, because that's not the goal. Our goal is to make sure first that everything works end to end. So when I do that, now I can do yield, and then all I'm going to say is put. And I'm just going to say, when featured events are loaded, I want to do load featured event success, and then I just wanted to pass it featured events. Remember that load featured event success was an action that we created here, and it takes in featured events. That's the one you want to call. So obviously you have to import it. So load featured event success, load events success, and then from, where are those? So inside the actions. There you go. And then all I'm going to do is yield put, and then I'm going to call load event success, and then I'm going to do events, right? That's the events JSON. So great, that's all we needed to do. All we're saying is once the API is done getting the events, call the action, and that action will call the reducer for the same. So when you do that, now inside your main page, let's go and now look at these guys and see what that looks like. Alright, everything's building. Let's refresh this guy. Boom, you get 2 events. You get 2 events. That's all you need, man. Now you have these in here. You can start, I'm going to comment this out again. I just leave them on because sometimes you need to debug when you add new stuff. But yeah, at this point, all you would do is you would have a featured events component that would take in featured events equal to featured events, And then you would have an events list component that would do events equal to events. That's it. You're loading your featured events, you're loading your events. Obviously, these need to be defined separately. But essentially what I was able to show you within minutes is that you were able to do everything using best practices. You've been able to add your constants. You've been able to add your actions. Um, you've been able to add your reducers. You've been able to add your Saga. And you've been able to use your selectors. But this is pretty powerful here. All you need to do now is literally go in and build these dumb components for featured events and featured list and events list, and then pass that and make sure that they render correctly, and then make one simple call using Axios or something like that to call the API, and you're done.